We are now streaming. Well, it was kind of already streaming, but we're officially streaming. So I'm sorry for any background noise. Everything is noisy today. It's always on a Thursday where everybody wants to be noisy in the background. But okay, so hello, my name is Danielle. I am the education specialist here at the Turning Point Rape Crisis Center, and this is our wonderful panel of Breaking the Mold, Men's Take on Supporting Survivors. So I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping and then we'll get started with our conversation. So so this is our presentation. It takes unity. It's a bystander's guide on being empowered and educated, because once we're educated about the problem, we can be the change to fix it and support survivors along the way. So here at the Turning Point, we have a 24-hour crisis hotline, which is 1-800-886-7273. And at that number, you can call regarding any questions you have regarding sexual violence. So we offer 3 things. So counseling, we offer 110% free counseling for survivors of sexual violence and their friends and family members. Next, we offer advocacy, which is where we go into the hospital and support survivors during their sexual assault nurse examination. And then lastly is this, education, where we go into the community and different online platforms and spread awareness about the roots and causes of sexual violence and how you can be the change to fix it. Our mission is to highlight the impact of sexual violence on individuals and our community through education programs that foster hope, encourage change, and prevent sexual violence. Join us in the fight against sexual violence. The Turning Point is committed to reducing the prevalence of sexual violence in our community, and we firmly believe that for this change to occur, each person has a responsibility and must do their part to prevent sexual violence. So, now that that's done, let's just go around and say your name and what you do with the Turning Point. Like, what is your job title?
I'll start. My name's Andy. I am a staff advocate for the Turning Point. I've been an advocate about 7 months now. So I go into the hospitals primarily.
Yay! And then Stephen.
Stephen Hood. I serve as the Director of Finance for the organization and a member of the leadership team.
Yeah, money man. And Brian.
My name is Brian Fawning, and I am the Sexual Assault Response Team Facilitator, as well as Law Enforcement Training Program Manager for the Turning Point.
Yay! Okay, so now that we've gotten that out of the way, I chose each and every one of you because all 3 of you have instrumental positions in helping survivors, and oftentimes we showcase our female employees and female supporters of survivors, the advocates and things like that. And so I wanted to take this time to be able to showcase the men that are supporting survivors and being a change and being advocates. And so first things first, how did you get involved in the sexual violence field of work? We can go in the same order.
Okay. I think we all have a pretty common reason. I mean, this is a very specific industry. So, and kind of similar to like psychology, you know, people really get passionate about the work if they either have a personal experience or someone they love, someone close to them has a personal experience. And that rings true with me. That was kind of how I kind of found my calling.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Stephen.
Well, over the last 30 years, I've worked with a lot of nonprofit organizations and been involved with a variety of social issues and focused on cases that worked with domestic violence, sex trafficking. But it really wasn't until I joined the team at the Turning Point where sexual violence and working with victim survivors has been, the central focus of the organization.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then Brian.
I spent 20 years in law enforcement and specifically as a sex crimes detective. So I was instrumental in helping kind of get some of the ideas put in place for Courtney's Safe Place, which is the forensic clinic here at the Turning Point. And so when I retired and became a nurse, I came to work for the Turning Point to help train law enforcement officers in kind of that trauma-informed response to sexual assault investigations.
I love that. I love that. I love that. I love that all the time. And I love that we get to showcase this today. So what does justice for survivors look like to each of you?
It's tough because, you know, obviously we all want to help everybody, and we would love every perpetrator to be 100% prosecuted every single time. And then, you know, the whole therapeutic process, counseling is so crucial and important, but really it all comes down to each unique survivor. Everybody has their own process for how they cope with their trauma. So who am I to say what that is for somebody? You know, my job is to help them find it, but it's their healing path. So it's really up to them what it looks like.
Wow, that was like a 10 out of 10 answer. Okay. Now you got to follow that up, Stephen.
Yeah. Well, I think along those same lines, I think that's a real challenging question to answer. And it's hard to say, what does justice look like? But I can say that, you know, my answer 20 years ago would be one answer. 15 years ago, I might have another answer, and even 5 years, yet a different answer. But I think that as an advocate, my focus and attention is on the survivor and their concerns, and to assist them as best that I can in justice that's defined by them. And I think that one of the things that I've seen over the years is a constantly changing pattern that shifts based on experiences and their own understanding. And justice may not be defined as that conventional criminal process, but one that seeks, as victim survivors look at things, they seek for accountability, consequences, dignity, voice, and then even prevention.
Yeah. Those are all great answers. Okay, Brian.
So coming from a law enforcement background, I mean, obviously the justice part would be what some people would think of as that traditional piece, which is, you know, to get some type of punishment or some type of consequences for the perpetrator. But like Andy and Steve said already, that's really, really difficult to obtain, especially in these cases sometimes. And so really justice for the survivor, as they both have already put it, is really an individual piece. And so it's really up to us as advocates to find out what that piece is for each individual survivor and help them seek, you know, and achieve that justice for them.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love your answers. They're so instrumental to survivors and their journey and exemplifying how individual those experiences are, and that at the root of it all, we just want them to have dignity and find peace. And so for my parents, how did you talk to your kids about sexual violence?
I'll divert to you guys. I am not a parent.
So we pass it off to you, Stephen and Brian.
Well, it's a difficult topic to bring up, particularly with younger children as they're growing. And in fact, to be able to talk to two daughters differently than I would speak to my son and to share. But I think that it goes back to beginning with some of the fundamentals of how we treat other people. It comes down to, how do we treat people with respect and dignity, to teaching about boundaries. And I think that those are some of the life lessons that go across all aspects of parenting and living, but beginning with that. And then I think that as children become older, to be able to share with them that yes, violence does happen, and that there is an opportunity for us to stand in the gap, to make a difference in the lives of other people by working against that violence.
That's a good answer. What about you, Brian?
I think, like Steven said, it's different for the age groups and everything, but I think once, like I have two boys, one that's an adult now and one that's almost an adult. And so I think, now it's even more important that, we just have honest conversations with them. It's not so much that, we even try to sugarcoat the things that are out there when they're younger. We try to keep them safe, and we use different language, and we use age appropriate information. But as they get older, it's important to kind of speak the truth and talk about things the way they are, and have them have us as parents help open their eyes in a way that brings light to the situations that they can find themselves in, and situations that they find others in, and how they can go about helping others and then keeping themselves from being stuck in situations.
That's exactly the point, is that over time, it's going to transition, it's going to change, whether you start whenever they're really young and you start with little things like, if somebody touches you here, tell your parent, or this, that, and the other, or these are some places that are safe, you're safe people, and those kind of things. And then whenever they're transitioning and they're older, it's like, this is what a relationship dynamic should look like. This is what a relationship dynamic shouldn't look like. This is what consent is and what it isn't. And so I love that you brought up that point of it transitioning and being an ongoing, flowing conversation, because oftentimes, so many times, people think that it's a one-off conversation and then you never speak about it again. But as they grow and as they change and as they get older, things and dynamics change. I mean, whenever we were younger, social media wasn't something that needed to be talked about with kids, and how to keep yourself safe on online platforms. But now it's something that needs to be talked about so early, because kids are getting on social media, Instagram, and all these things, and being able to have interactions with people who aren't in their circle. And so I love that you brought up that point. Let me get back to the thing. So, what made you want to advocate for others? And I know we kind of talked about this in the sense of like how you got involved, but what makes you want to, instead of saying this is a bad thing and somebody should stop it, you being put into the place of, I want to be a part of the change to stop this problem?
Yeah, so it kind of intersects. I mean, I'm in a unique position where I'm kind of a frontline advocate. I'm there real quickly after an assault happens. And obviously, education and prevention is so crucial, but things do happen, and that's my job. I'm there with them. But I think kind of what you touched on, other than my personal reasons for pursuing this, it's just, I mean, I've only been doing this 7 months, but the need is so prevalent. Sexual violence is such a prevalent thing everywhere. And it's just very important to me to be able to help people that may not have that voice yet. They've been in the shadows for who knows how long, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, to help them come forward and really just pursue their own healing path.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, Steven.
Yeah, I think it's part of the fabric of who I am as an individual. And I think the perspective that I could take is to sum it up in one word, and that's others. As I mentioned, I think my focus is as an advocate and as one who does advocate for others is to stand in the gap, to speak for those who may have no voice or afraid to speak, to guide people onto a path or to help bring light to those surrounded in darkness. I think that kind of defines a little bit about who I am. It's why I want to be there.
I love that. Yeah, it's so important to be a part of the gap and be a part of the change. And Ryan, I'll let you say your piece and then I'll rant a little bit.
For me, it's just the right thing to do. And so, choosing the right thing to do. And also because I do have two, one adult male now, and then one about to be, two men that are going to be joining, this crazy world and society and fast-paced thing that for me, that's what makes me want to do this even more, is to show those that come behind us what the right thing to do is. And that sometimes that the right thing is not always the easy thing, but it's still the right thing.
Yeah. I think that that's such an important part of advocacy, and something that we all face in this work is that it isn't easy work, but it's work that needs to be done, because so often we can see, oh, this needs to change, but then step away from it and be like, but it's not going to be me who's going to do the changing. But I think that's something that's so important to acknowledge, is that to get into this space, you had to decide that you wanted to be the gap, and you wanted to be a change for the next generation and be able to impact and help others. And I just wanted to give you guys that extra, like, I love y'all for how you help and support survivors. So, what are your strengths and weaknesses in advocacy?
So that's always a tough one for me to answer. And I don't like the word weakness. I like to say areas of opportunity instead. I feel like there's always, things that you're really good at and things you might not be as great at, but it's always something to work on. I'm a psychology major, and the ultimate goal for me, I want to be a trauma psychologist. And so I think that's a big strength for me, just having that knowledge, having that face-to-face interaction with people, knowing what to look for, and just, really it all comes down to just, you have to be there for them in that moment. And it's just it's a very human thing, and if you're there for the right reasons and you're confident and you have a calm and approaching presence, then that's really all that's all it comes down to.
Yeah. Steven, what do you think?
It's been said that I maintain a pastor's heart in caring for others, and I think that part of that is so I look at that and I say as a strength to be able to be very open, to be able to share, to be sympathetic and empathetic to a situation. I think part of the weakness is I don't know everything. I've honestly, I've had very little exposure to the history of sexual violence, and then trying to stay current on everything that I can for that individual. But I think that as was shared in training, the best part about being an advocate, put everything aside, you want to be able to be a part just as you would to a closest friend or even a family member when you're reaching out to them. And I think that's the approach that I look at, and to just care for that individual, to be there and to support them through everything.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to put it. I love how you said you have a pastor's heart for things. And the way that we care about survivors is we have to love them so hard because I mean, it's such hard work, and we love them and we want them to, be on the path to healing and recovery and support them in any way, whether that's in legal advocacy, advocacy in the hospital, in crisis, getting them involved with therapy. It's like we're just trying to help at any space where they are and get them someplace farther along in their journey. But Brian.
I like the whole idea that knowledge of things can be power. And, because I've spent a great deal of time in this area, not only just on one side, but through the nursing side, and then also through the law enforcement side and the crisis intervention side, that piece is pretty strong when I look at, how I approach advocacy. The one thing that Andy said that rings true is that it doesn't matter, and people will look at you and say, oh, well, being male could be a weakness, just because sexual assault survivors, tend to be predominantly female, which is a misnomer in itself. But really, confidence and compassion are the two things that people just really, truly gravitate towards. And but you can't have one without the other, right? You have to have someone who's confident and compassionate in order to move forward. The thing that sometimes I think myself and other people lose focus of is we get so hooked on fixing the problem rather than trying to let that person move through a journey and be broken for a while, just be broken. And so we, I think inherently as men want to fix things. And so we just have to, and I know I sometimes have to take a step back and go, okay, this is not my thing to fix. And it's okay if that person stays broken for just a little bit while we work through it, because this is, it's an important part of their journey.
Yeah, I love
I'd like to
that.
add to that, if you don't mind, Danielle.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
That is absolutely, Brian, I would say a weakness of mine. I've been told I type up after a case, I have like these case notes that I type up, and that is absolutely a weakness of mine. I catch myself the same thing. I have the brain and the heart of a therapist, and I want to help. I want to, fix everything. But like you said, and I tell this to my survivors all the time, it's okay to not be okay. And it's very important to understand that.
Yeah, I love that sentence. I've always loved that sentence. It's okay to not be okay. Like so often, like you said, it's like we're like, okay, let's get them to the next step. And we end up burning ourselves out trying to like rush survivors through their journey or whatever. And it's so often they just want to be heard where they're at. And I think that definitely is a weakness that we can all share in some capacity of burning ourselves out, exerting so much energy when we could just be meeting the survivor where they're at. So, as a man, how do you think that has shaped your advocacy? Do you think that being a man hasn't impacted advocacy at all? Or do you think that it has strengthened your advocacy? What has that looked like as far as advocacy goes?
I think for me, it's honestly helped me kind of outside of advocacy as well. Like when I'm in situations, not in an advocate position within a hospital, but just, whether it's with friends or at my other job, other office people, just in general, having that advocate experience has, and the fact that the three of us are men and there's just not as many male advocates out there. It's such a crucial role that I'm always talking about to everybody. And it's important to understand that we can help and it's okay for us to help.
Yeah. Steven.
Yeah, I think the same holds true. I don't necessarily see it as shaping my advocacy, but I think that being a man involved in advocacy has made a shift in me. with some of my other friends and social groups of redefining things and relationships. I also think that it has made me become a little more intentional. I'll never forget the first time receiving a case here at Courtney Safe Place, and stepping at the door and seeing the apprehension of this woman when I opened the door. And I realized that I needed to be very intentional in my comments, my words, and how I approach things, much more sensitive. So I'm not sure if that's how shaping my advocacy or shaping me as an individual and growing a little bit.
I'm gonna add a part 2 to the question, but Brian, okay, how does being a man shape your advocacy?
I think that really the biggest part is it opens up opportunities for conversation, because people, like Andy said, don't see a lot of males in that role. And you would have the people that would say, oh, like I said before, like a man can't do that. Or you know, if you do that, I mean, I've actually had people say, well, aren't people uncomfortable around you, and those types of things. And so the good thing is it opens up opportunities to speak to people about that, and just to basically teach them that it's not about who you are or what gender you are. It's really about compassion. And what's like what Stephen said, just that intentional compassion. No matter what gender, race, color you are, it's all about that base human need that someone else has to feel safe and secure. And so the ability for me as a man to provide that, even in a role that's seen as conventional, is a great opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. So I wanted to add a part 2, because as you were answering, I realized that I wanted to ask another kind of question in line with that question. Did you have any fears whenever you were branching into sexual violence work because you were a man? So like how Stephen said, whenever he went into his first case and the apprehension that was there, are there any fears that you have or had whenever you started this work about how you would be treated or received or anything like that?
Absolutely. Yeah, everybody, you know, kind of throughout training, I was scared, nervous, anxious, all of it. I had, you know, you have kind of like what Brian was saying, you have a lot of people saying, no, you shouldn't, you'll make it worse, you'll make them uncomfortable. Why are you doing this? It's weird. I mean, phrase after phrase after phrase from, I mean, friends, family, a lot of people. But like Stephen and Brian, and we've all talked about it, it really just comes down to compassion. And when you find yourself surrounded by like-minded people that share the same views, and not necessarily the same views, but just, you know, we all want to help survivors of sexual violence. And once I came to that conclusion, it's pretty much fine now.
That's awesome.
I like there's still times I have had a couple cases where you know, sometimes you recognize that you're in a situation to where, you know, because primarily the majority of perpetrators are men. They just are. Not always, but primarily. And you have to recognize that sometimes if somebody goes through something really, really traumatic, and they, you know, if they want a female advocate, you can't take it personally.
Mm-hmm.
That's happened to me once or twice, but not often, only once or twice. And so I think that's kind of just, you just have to realize it. But confidence and compassion 9 times out of 10 will win over.
Yeah, Okay, Stephen.
Yeah, I think I agree with what Andy said. I think there's always, is this going to go right? Am I going to be, accepted? Is this going to work? And I think that, as Andy pointed out, you're there for that person. You're there for that victim survivor, and you pour out what you can, and but you can't take things personally, and you just do your best to be that compassionate individual. But oh yeah, there's nervousness.
And Brian.
I think in the beginning, maybe, but coming from a pretty strong law enforcement background, I don't really take a whole lot personally. I've had a lot of things said to me in a lot of different ways that, you just don't take things personally. And to be honest, whenever you're investigating a case, they don't get to choose who their detective is. So for me, it was always about, being competent and making sure that, I did my job, but I didn't really worry too much about what, and sometimes in the beginning, I probably needed to a little bit more than I did, but I didn't really worry about what the other person thought about whether I was a male, female, whatever. It was just about doing my job and making sure that, that part was covered. You know, when you segue into a little bit more of an advocacy role versus a law enforcement role, you tend to, think a little bit more about, the other side rather than just law enforcement. But I don't remember ever really feeling uncomfortable just because I'd had so much interaction with so many different things, ahead of time before I started doing this work that, it kind of just was what it was at that point. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying not to get emotional because I was so sad whenever you were being told things by like friends and family members like, oh, don't do this, or you're gonna like you're not gonna be the best advocate. When I feel like male advocates are so important because, oh my gosh, stop getting emotional. Because as survivors, like you said, primarily perpetrators are men. And so to have a male advocate there who can be someone who is the first one that's there, who can kind of like be like, okay, so not all men are like this. You have this man who did something awful to you, but here I am and I want to help you. I'm here. Here are resources. Here's support. Here's all of that. And I think that has such a positive impact on their journey as a survivor, that it hurts my heart that anybody would ever dissuade or try to turn you away from going down that path. So I'm sorry, this is not, I didn't mean to get emotional, but I just wanted to say that each and every one of your journeys with advocacy is so important, and you have impacted survivors in such a positive way. And so I'm happy that each and every one of you went against the mold and broke the mold and, advocated for survivors and advocated for yourself in the fact that you are a willing and capable advocate to be able to make positive change. But on that note, let's end on a happy note. So what is your favorite part of advocacy?
Oh man, honestly, all of it. It's really hard to pick one specific moment. I think if I had to pick one, it depends on the SANE nurse. Every SANE nurse has their own preferences. Some like to walk in together, not usually, but I like to arrive early. I like to be there like 15, 20 minutes before the nurse. I walk in there, say who I am, who I work for, all of that. But establishing that rapport and those, 10 to 20 minutes before the nurse, is there talking with that whole process. It's so important and kind of sets the tone for the rest of the exam. Obviously, each case is unique. You can't always establish that rapport right away. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But that's probably my favorite part. If I had to pick one, just you walk in there and just really the compassion just comes out.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought about that part. And Stephen, what's your favorite part? Money man.
Yeah. Okay. So money man, as a finance person, and I think, Brian alluded to it earlier, as guys, we like to fix things. We want to make it all better. As a finance person, I like to see things completed, the big picture, the books balanced. So for me, when you think about advocacy, it's difficult because you never really see the completed part. You're there at the time of crisis. You're there typically at the beginning of what's happening. And so I think that to be able to look back and to say, I played a part. I've done my part. I contributed with the information, with the support, with the caring, and help. And I think that it goes back to something I said earlier, is by the fabric of who I am, I want to be able to help people find the path, to give them the information that they need to begin their journey, and to help them, guide them. So I think for me is just to be a part of that process and to know that I've made a difference. But sadly, I don't think we ever really get to see it all come together. But just being there and being a part of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, Brian.
For me, I actually do get to see some of the outcomes, good and bad. It's not always, what we would hope for sometimes when it comes to the criminal justice system. But, one of the biggest things that I think anyone who's in advocacy, our favorite part is just the interaction with people, that human aspect of it. And so, not to go to dad nerd on people, but, there's a Boy Scout saying that says, leave things better than you found them. And my goal and my purpose and what makes me the most happy is when I'm able to meet someone where they're at and leave them better than I found them, so that the incident that caused so much pain and heartache doesn't become that sticking post that turns everything south, that it's actually something that can be an incident that happened, but something that they can grow from, be stronger from, and know that they can be better. And so for me, my favorite part is to play that role, or help play that role of getting them and leaving them better than we found them, meeting them where they're at and helping them move through that process of healing, of being able to move forward. Because like you said, it's really important for people who've been victimized and had things violated, had them, their personal space, because there's really no other crime out there that is so personal. You can break into someone's house and steal their stuff, but that's their house. And this is the person, and you can never totally get those feelings of safety and security back. But us being there, showing them that there are good male interactions, good males out there that can be in their lives in a way that helps them heal, I think, helps do that whole idea of leaving them better than we found them.
Yeah, I love that. So before we close, I just want like a 1-sentence short thing that you would say to somebody who is a man who has been thinking about getting involved in helping with sexual violence, whether it be advocacy or nursing or so on and so forth. So what is one thing that you would say, a one piece of advice to someone who's looking to get involved in this field?
I would just say it's, of course, in the early stages, that anxiety, it's tough to say anything that will totally take that away initially. But I would just tell them, just acknowledge to yourself, tell yourself you're there for the right reason. And, you know, if that first step for you is wanting to help, that's all it is. Just take that, show compassion, be confident, and you'll be fine.
Perfect. Stephen.
Yeah, I would encourage them to step out and to be a part. And you're right. It's about compassion. It's about caring for one another. I think that one of the things, and being here for for several months, I think that one of the things that I learned was that the healing for the individual is really what they strive for, is the healing that exists between the victim survivor and the community to be restored back to a point of normalcy. And I thought that was very interesting. So I think that, even in our day-to-day, everyday occurrences, is that to have that primary vision of helping folks get restored to their community, to their support network, to their environment, and to bring back that sense of normalcy. And we all have that opportunity.
Yeah. And Brian.
So I think the biggest advice that I could ever give anyone is for people to know that they don't have to have all the answers. Don't listen to the people who are saying you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't try to help people, because that just doesn't make sense. When someone says you shouldn't, if you have a heart to help people, you shouldn't do that because this situation isn't. I just would remind people that every single one of us as human beings, have the basic need of safety and security, and that anyone can help provide that if they are willing to step in and do it.
Yeah. Woo. All of those were such powerful end notes. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here and using your voice today, and breaking the mold. If you are watching this and this is your first Empowered Education presentation, make sure to turn our post notifications on, give this video a like, and leave a comment down below. If you have any questions, refer to our crisis line before, and you can call that number at any time and have any questions you have revolving around sexual violence answered, and we'll see you next Thursday. Bye.